Hello, listeners! Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age and the few years surrounding it. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Today's episode is dedicated to my friend Cindy. Whenever a friend comments on the show when I'm out in the wild, I ask them for requests on stars that they would like to hear me cover. And Cindy didn't hesitate with her recent suggestion. Today, we will be discussing the stunning blonde bombshell, Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield was born Vera Jane Palmer in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania on April 19, 1933. Her father, Herbert, was a lawyer, and her mother, Vera, was an elementary school teacher before she became a mother. Little Vera Jane was the second child for Herbert and Vera, but their first son had sadly died during childbirth. So Vera Jane grew up as an only child. The family moved to Phillipsburg, New Jersey, shortly after Vera Jane was born. The young family had so much hope and dreams for their future. But fate would step in and destroy all of that hope and every single dream they had. When Vera Jane was only 3 years old, her father died of a massive heart attack. As tragic as that alone is, the circumstances were terrifying and an eerie foreshadowing into Jane's own fate. The family was traveling in their car when Herbert had the heart attack. He was behind the wheel with Vera and 3-year-old Vera Jane as passengers. Here are Jayne Mansfield's own words about the tragic event. She said, "We were driving up a steep hill. We were all laughing and joking. Mama thought of something funny about a dinner party she was giving that night. She started to tell Daddy about it. Suddenly, our laughter froze. Daddy fell over against Mama. He was dead, just like that. My daddy was gone. It started to rain, and there we were, Mama and me and the rain washing away our tears. The rain has been my tormentor all my life." Vera had managed to grab the wheel and swerve the car to safety, saving herself and Vera Jane from further tragedy. Their lives had forever changed in an instant. One second they were a laughing, happy family, the next a shattered picture of a family crushed by death. Herbert Palmer was only 32 years old. 3 years after her husband's death, Vera married a man named Harry Pierce from Dallas, and she and now 6-year-old Vera Jane took his name and relocated to Texas to start a new life with him. Vera Jane was as girly can be as a child, and she loved everything pink. She would always love everything pink. She was an outgoing child and loved by all. So much so that she was voted queen of her class in the 3rd grade. Well, the queen of the 3rd grade had a little spunk in her. When she was 9 years old, she read in the Ladies' Home Journal magazine that anyone who had recently given birth to triplets would be awarded a free case of soap. First of all, I think anyone who gave birth to 3 babies at one time in the 1940s deserves a hell of a lot more than a case of soap. But anyways, 9-year-old Vera Jane read this and decided she needed that soap. So she wrote the magazine, proudly announcing the birth of her adorable newborn triplets, Janny, Sammy, and Pammy. And she got the soap. I just love that so much. Vera Jane loved going to the movies. When she was a child, the ultra-famous child star Shirley Temple was her absolute favorite star to see on screen. And she would perform at home just like Shirley Temple did on screen. Whether it be to her mother and stepfather or to herself in the mirror, she wanted to be a movie star, just like Shirley Temple. When she grew from a little girl to a teenage beauty, she turned her fangirl admiration to Betty Grable. Academically, the queen of the 3rd grade was now an above-average high school student. Vera Jane played both violin and piano and gravitated towards foreign language studies in school. She became fluent in both German and Spanish in high school, and later in adulthood, she learned French and Italian. She really wanted to be in her high school drama club. She auditioned but didn't make the cut. Although her acting aspirations didn't pan out in high school, she was highly successful in all other areas of her education. A reporter later called her the, quote, smartest dumb blonde in Hollywood. She reportedly had an extremely high IQ. A former classmate recounted that Vera Jayne didn't date much in high school. In December of 1949, though, 16-year-old Vera Jayne met a 20-year-old man named Paul Mansfield at a friend's Christmas party. And a little over a month later, she married that man. Vera Jayne Peer and Paul Mansfield were married in a secret ceremony on January 28, 1950. Vera Jayne fibbed a little on her age in order to get married because she did not have her mother and stepfather's consent. In fact, they didn't even know their teenage daughter was married for a few months. "We got married in a fever, hotter than a couple of cats," Paul later said. The newlyweds rented a cheap little apartment to call their home, but Vera Jayne was so terrified to break the news to her parents that she continued to return to her family home by her 11 o'clock curfew every single night. She pulled it off for the first few months of the super secret marriage, but once she was sporting a baby bump, she was forced to come clean. Vera Jayne and Paul were expecting a baby, just shy of Vera Jayne's high school graduation. Can you imagine that family meeting? I'm sure it took a few days for all of that new information to sink in. Once the Peers were able to come to terms with it all, they planned an official wedding for the young newlyweds together with the Mansfields. Now, I read differing accounts of this, both that they told their parents they had already eloped and they wanted to give them a proper wedding, and that they had just told them they were expecting a baby and the parents thought they were giving them their first actual wedding. Whatever the exact circumstances, Vera Jayne walked down the aisle and said "I do" in front of family and friends, and then 1 month later, she walked across the stage and accepted her high school diploma. And then 6 months after that, she gave birth to a little girl named Jayne Marie Mansfield. It was at this time, during her official wedding to Paul Mansfield, that Vera Jayne Peer became Jayne Mansfield. She liked the sound of Jayne Mansfield, so she started going by her middle name. She knew it was a movie star name and that it would look great on the marquee lights, and we'll soon find out that she was right. Parenthood wasn't going to stop Paul and Jayne from achieving their academic dreams. Paul had already returned to college by the time little Jayne Marie was born, and Jayne began her college career just a few months after she had the baby. And the baby went to school with her almost every day. She brought her right into her classrooms with her. Jayne was a rock star. She did all of the regular duties of a young wife and mother, cleaning, laundry, parenting. Well, almost all of the regular duties of a wife. She didn't know how to cook. Plus, she kept straight A's in college, where she was in the drama program. She was also in the drama club. She acted in plays with the Austin Civic Theater. She participated in and won several beauty pageants. And she held down at least 2 jobs. Plus, she made a little extra money by posing nude for the college art department. She recalled of this, quote, "I found I could pose nude in front of a women's sculpturing class without any embarrassment, or even any feeling of uneasiness. Soon after that, a men's sculpting class asked me to pose for them. They even offered to up the price, but I didn't like that," end quote. Yeah, I bet they did. So back to those beauty pageants for a minute. I'm not kidding here. The number of pageants she won took up almost an entire page in one of the books I read. I won't make you sit through all of them, but I do want to share a few of them that stuck out to me. Jayne Mansfield was crowned Gas Station Queen, Miss Direct Mail, Miss 100% Maple Syrup, Miss Potato Soup, Miss Negligee, Miss Lobster, and the Hot Dog Ambassador. They were apparently just having beauty pageants for every single thing imaginable in the early 1950s. Just so you can get a picture of Jayne Mansfield during this time, she wasn't the blonde bombshell that we all know her as. She had a girl next door image. She didn't showcase her amazing figure at all, and she had dark brown hair. She was gorgeous, but pretty unrecognizable as the Jayne Mansfield we all know today. Before long, Jayne was appearing in show after show on stage. But although Jayne was enamored by this show business life, Paul was quickly learning it wasn't really for him. Paul graduated from college in 1952 and was immediately drafted into the Army Reserves. Paul and Jayne relocated to Georgia, leaving little Jayne Marie under the care of her grandparents. Jayne didn't really want to go, but she later said, quote, "He promised to take me to Hollywood and let me try for a movie career if I accompanied him during his military duty," end quote. And that was her goal, so she went. Jayne spent her time as a military wife attending dance and singing lessons and acting in lots of local stage productions. She was doing everything she could to enhance her talents and ensure that she was going to be a star. She wasn't, however, very beloved by the other Army wives. Many of the men had taken notice of the beauty, and it seems there was a little dusting of jealousy floating around amongst the other wives. It didn't help that Jayne spent most of her time on base, waltzing around in swimsuits and as little clothing as possible. Apparently, this was the point when she began flaunting that figure. Bad timing. She'd had enough of the judgy life on the Army base, and she didn't want to wait another second for her big Hollywood dreams. She got herself much closer to those dreams when she left the base after just a few months and enrolled in a semester at the University of Southern California, and filled her class load with as many drama courses as possible. After one semester, Jayne returned to Texas to stay with her parents and her daughter, and she returned to college there. Meanwhile, Paul was shipped off to Korea. He returned in late 1953, excited to return to his wife and daughter and continue building their life together. And he kept his promise to Jayne. The family moved to Los Angeles so Jayne could reach for stardom in Hollywood. They moved into a small home and both took on jobs to make ends meet while Jayne chased her dreams of stardom. Jayne sold candy and photo albums door to door. Definitely not a career that still exists today. Paul worked a few different dead-end jobs. The couple was barely scraping by, but Jayne was immediately visiting the studios, making her Hollywood entrance known. And she turned her brunette hair platinum blonde to make herself pop even more. It didn't take long for Paul to question his future, now that they were in LA and he saw just how determined his wife was to achieve stardom. A small part of him had hoped he would bring her out here, she would see how difficult it was to become a star, and a defeated Jayne would submit to a life as a traditional housewife and mother so they could live happily ever after in a routine traditional life. But Jayne was much too vibrant and determined to let that happen. Less than a year after the family's arrival in LA, and after about 4 years together, the couple separated and Paul moved to San Francisco. Jayne and little Jayne Marie stayed in LA. "I couldn't see myself being a Mr. Jayne Mansfield for the rest of my life," Paul said. Believe it or not, Jayne Mansfield's beauty wasn't considered to be in the striking drop-dead gorgeous category when she first set off to appear in films. And her curvy hourglass figure and large bust were considered a distraction in the extra or bit parts that she was chasing. And there were hundreds of other curvy blondes trying to achieve the same future she was. But did they all have the strong ambition of Jayne Mansfield? Jayne turned 21 years old in April of 1954, still very fresh in LA, having not even been there a year yet. That year, her grandmother died, and she inherited $6,000, which she immediately spent on creating her image. She used some to make a down payment on a bungalow in Beverly Hills, which she named Mansfield's Madness. She had a pool installed, and she bought 3 luxurious mink stools. I'll hold my comment on that since it was the 1950s. And then she bought herself a shiny new pink Jaguar. I forgot to mention one of her new mink stools was also pink. Pink was her color. She said, "A girl needs mink, and it might as well be pink." Jayne was extremely happy in this new independent life of hers, a life with so much hope and excitement for whatever the future may hold. but she'd spent about 3 times as much as that $6,000 inheritance she'd received. So she was now in some pretty heavy debt. She was living the life of a star without the star's salary. About becoming a star, Jayne was having a tougher time getting parts than she expected. Time after time, when she would show up to studios, she was asked if she was a member of the Screen Actors Guild, had her union card, or if she was willing to submit to the casting couch, aka sleep her way into a role. She wasn't, she didn't, and she wasn't willing. She recalled to an interviewer once that during this chase of stardom, she had called Universal Studios and said, "I'm Jayne Mansfield and I want to be a movie star." To which she received the reply, "Well, thank you, Jayne Mansfield, but we already have a movie star." She wasn't giving up. She was determined to become a movie star. While she was studio hopping, waiting for that big chance at stardom, she still had to have some kind of job to pay for that fancy lifestyle she'd given herself. So she took on a job that could pay the bills and benefit her aspiring movie career. 2 birds, 1 stone. Her new place of employment was Ciro's, one of the most popular nightclubs on the Sunset Strip, where all of the who's who of Hollywood would frequent. Jayne was a photo girl, so she was getting paid to table hop the tables of stars, directors, and studio execs. While working at Ciro's, Jayne Mansfield finally received a break that got her onto screen. It was a TV screen, but she was happy to finally get her foot in the door. She received a small part on an episode of Lux Video Theater. That Ciro's job paid off again in late 1954 when she got a role in a thriller called Female Jungle, in which she was the 4th billed talent. This film introduced the world to Jayne Mansfield. And the world was about to see more of her because this role led to a contract with Warner Brothers Studio. It didn't end up being the path to instant stardom she'd hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. "I saw myself on screen for the first time, and it was love at first sight," she said. She instantly secured a press agent, and together they would make sure nobody would miss the entrance of Jayne Mansfield into the Hollywood scene. She was willing to talk to any reporter, pose for any camera, and appear at any event. She had striking beauty, an amazing body, and a vibrant personality that drew everyone in. You couldn't miss Jayne Mansfield, and when you saw her, she would leave you wanting more. Jayne Mansfield was a master of self-promotion, and one stunt she pulled worked amazingly at getting people to take notice of her. She crashed a press event for the Jane Russell film Underwater that was being held in Florida in 1955. In front of tons and tons of the press, whoopsies, her bikini top fell off right in the pool. This made a lot of people take notice. One man in particular noticed, and he wanted a piece of Jayne Mansfield: Hugh Hefner. Jayne first appeared in the still new Playboy magazine in February of 1955. She was that year's Miss Valentine Playmate, but she didn't appear completely nude. Remember, Jayne is a single mother to a 4-year-old during this time. Even though it sounds like she was off chasing her show business dreams day and night, her daughter Jane Marie recalled being taken along with her mother to as many places as possible and having an extremely close relationship with her. But in reality, although she was physically with her mother, she was being primarily cared for by nannies. Jane's sexy image was getting her attention and more roles. But although this image was her own creation, she wanted to actually act, too. She didn't want to be just put on the screen for her body and her platinum hair. She wanted to prove her acting abilities in good roles. What better place to do this than on Broadway? Jane Marie, and their crew of dogs relocated to New York City in the fall of 1955, so Jane could appear in the Broadway production of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, co-starring with Walter Matthau. She was habitually late for rehearsals because she was still prioritizing building her image. She displayed herself at numerous supermarket opening ceremonies while on the East Coast, along with any other promotional event she could squeeze herself into: charities, movie premieres, dog shows, anything. Jayne's performance in Rock Hunter was a hit, and she was now beginning to be seen as not only sexy, but funny and talented. She was an overnight star. Her stardom dreams were coming true. Jayne continued to ride the press waves, and she was giving daily interviews and posing for dozens of photographers every single day. This eagerness made her the brunt of jokes, the press-hungry, hopeful sex symbol. But hey, it was working. And then, enter Mickey Hargitay. Jayne dated a lot of men during her time in LA and New York, but when she met Hungarian muscle man Mickey Hargitay in May of 1956, that was it. She had snagged herself Mr. Universe, literally. Both Jayne and Mickey were legally married to other people, although long separated from their spouses, and both had young daughters. Now, having a reason to push those divorces through, both of them finally officially ended their first marriages so they could focus on each other without any unwanted trouble. But Mickey traveled a lot for his shows. He was appearing in Mae West shows, so Jayne wrapped herself around the arm of many other men in his absence. She couldn't go out on the town promoting herself alone, could she? She even brought 3 escorts to dinner with her on one evening: game show host Robert Q. Lewis, plus her Great Dane and her Chihuahua. I love how she had the tiniest and the largest dogs possible. Her pink poodle, yes pink, had recently died. Speaking of Mae West, she did not like one of the best men in her show dating the alluring Jayne Mansfield. She tried to force him to stop dating her, but you can't force yourself between an attraction like they had. It got pretty ugly, actually, but they came out the other side together. After a 1-year successful run of 444 performances of Rock Hunter, it was time to head back to Hollywood and get back onto the silver screen, hopefully in bigger and better roles. She was going to be the new Marilyn Monroe, and she slid right into Marilyn's studio, too. Jayne Mansfield hit gold when she starred in the 20th Century Fox hit The Girl Can't Help It in 1956. And she followed that up with the film version of her successful Broadway show, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, in which she snagged a role for her boyfriend Mickey, too. She had finally catapulted into the movie star life she had worked so hard to attain. And she had finally gained the respect from Hollywood as a box office superstar. In January of 1958, Jayne Mansfield married her bodybuilder and actor hunk, Mickey Hargitay. Thousands of onlookers showed up to catch a glimpse of the stunning Hollywood power couple on their wedding day. Seriously, these two were the most gorgeous couple. Have any of you seen photos online of Jayne Mansfield's infamous pink palace? Well, we are at the point in our story where Jayne gets that mansion of her dreams. Mickey had a pink heart-shaped pool installed in it for his new wife. Actually, almost every inch of the house was adorned in pink, and the outside, of course, was pink stucco. While having the pink palace redecorated, Jayne invited reporters in for a tour. She noted to them, quote, "There will be a Texas-sized bed that's bigger than king-sized. There will be a heart-shaped red canopy over the bed. On the wall above the bed, there will be cupids and arrows in marble. All around the bottom of the bed will be pink fluorescent lighting," end quote. Yikes. You have to check out the photos online. The worst part to me was the pink bathroom in which a gold heart-shaped jacuzzi sat in a sea of pink, including thick pink shag carpet, not only on the floor, but all the way up every single wall and up the sides of the hot tub. In fact, Jayne said in that press tour that they had torn out the tile in all 11 of the home's bathrooms and replaced it all with pink shag carpet. Yuck. Oh, that just does not sound very sanitary to me. The mansion and its customizations cost a fortune, but a quick trip to Vegas would remedy those costs. And I'm not talking about the craps table. Jayne Mansfield did a series of shows at the Tropicana for a whopping $25,000 per week. That would be almost $273,000 per week today. It was 10 times her salary back at 20th Century Fox. Jayne and Mickey were living the high life. And then, 11 months after they were married, they welcomed a little baby boy into the family, Mickey Hargitay Jr. And less than 2 years later, in August of 1960, son Zoltan was born. Fox was not showcasing Jayne Mansfield once she was a couple of years into her contract. But they made big bucks loaning her out to other studios. She didn't make big bucks, but they did. And a lot of these studio loans sent her to Europe for mediocre at best films. She returned to Europe for work a second time only 1 month after little Zoltan was born. She felt as though Fox was trying to kill her career. What was looking like her being the next Marilyn Monroe had been quickly sidetracked to her being a cheap knockoff version. And she wasn't going to stand for that. A terrifying tragedy occurred in 1962. And because of her history of outrageous publicity stunts, many didn't believe in its truth at first, and many still don't. Jayne and Mickey were vacationing in the Bahamas when the boat they were traveling on capsized. They could not be located, dead or alive, and for 2 days both of them were presumed dead. And Jayne did indeed come very close to death in the accident. Mickey Hargitay recounted that after the accident, he resurfaced in the water but couldn't find Jayne. She had hit her head and lost consciousness and was somewhere under the water. He frantically searched for her and thankfully was able to find her and save her. The two were literally stranded on an island for 2 days, surrounded by shark-infested waters. Yet many in the public didn't believe any of it was true. 1962 brought more heartbreak when Jayne was dropped from her contract with 20th Century Fox. And then even more shock and heartbreak when Marilyn Monroe unexpectedly died. And with her death came the death of the era of the blonde bombshell sex symbols. Without Marilyn, it just couldn't go on. Jayne and Mickey's marriage was already seeing major cracks by this time, too. Jayne was having a lot of affairs, and Mickey even caught her in the act on one occasion, with not one but 2 other men. Yet he remained a very forgiving and loyal man. With her career on the decline, Jayne was grasping at anything she could to keep her Hollywood image of a beautiful movie star going. She had been appearing in Playboy almost every year since her first Valentine's shoot in 1955, but in 1963, she appeared in a much more daring way in the publication. This time, she had a multi-page pictorial that was way more explicit than any other she'd appeared in. And this spread of Jayne Mansfield resulted in the arrest of Hugh Hefner for the publishing of obscene material. Grasping at another straw, both Jayne and Mickey appeared together in the comedy Promises, Promises. And in this film, Jayne Mansfield became the first woman to appear nude in an American film. It was now clear that her career was failing, and failing fast. Her next job was appearing on stage again, but not the high-paying headlining type show like the one she'd done in Vegas. This time she was on the stage of a supper club in North Carolina doing a striptease act. Alongside her career struggles, Jayne had become addicted to weight loss pills and alcohol. Through all of this, her failing career, her fall from stardom, the affairs, the struggles with addiction, Mickey Hargitay was the solid rock by her side throughout it all. He truly loved her so much, and he was willing to stay by her side for better or worse. He was the strength she needed when she couldn't find all of her own. Now I know some of you have been waiting patiently for the arrival of future Law & Order SVU star and downright amazing human being, Mariska Hargitay's entrance into our story. Well, your time has come. In January of 1964, Jayne Mansfield gave birth to her 4th child, a daughter they named Mariska, the future Olivia Benson. Jayne was forced to take roles with regional stage productions after Mariska was born, and she appeared in 2 plays in which Marilyn Monroe had starred in the film versions, Bus Stop and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. While working on Bus Stop, Jayne began another affair, this time with the show's director, Matt Cimber. But this affair was different. Jayne was in love with Matt. Mickey Hargitay would have done anything for his wife. He had done almost everything for his wife. He forgave her, he supported her struggles, he was a wonderful father to their children together and her firstborn daughter, Jayne Marie. But when Jayne came to him and said she wanted out of the marriage so she could marry another man, that she didn't love him anymore, he was left with no choice. She shattered his heart into a million pieces when she walked away. Jayne instantly married Matt, and she very quickly realized it was a mistake. There was a darker side to him that became visible shortly after they got married, and there were bruises visible on Jayne's body to showcase this to others. Jayne would return to Mickey for help and support, but as he said, quote, "I loved her, but I was powerless. I couldn't do anything. She was married to another man," end quote. As you can imagine, this new tumultuous relationship escalated Jayne's spiral into the hole of addiction, which now also included LSD. Her oldest daughter, Jayne Marie, often had to step in and become a caregiver for her. She was a young teenager who felt that it was her responsibility to protect and take care of her mother. She cared for her when she was drunk or high, she watered down liquor bottles, and she flushed away pills. She did things no child should ever have to do for their parent. Jayne was certain she still had a huge film role on her way that would revive her career. She turned down every minor role that came her way, every television role she was offered. She was holding out for that big movie role that she knew was right around the corner. She even turned down the role of Ginger on Gilligan's Island. She wouldn't settle for that. She was a movie star, a real movie star, not a television star playing a movie star. Jayne gave birth to her fifth and final child on October 18, 1965, a little boy named Antonio with Matt Cimber. And just a few months later, Jayne and Matt separated. Jayne hired powerhouse attorney Sam Brody to assist her in her custody battle with Matt over baby Tony, and he became the new man in Jayne Mansfield's life. Unfortunately, their relationship was extremely toxic and abusive as well. Against all odds, Jayne was right about her career. Well, kind of. She was invited back to 20th Century Fox in 1967 to appear in a film filled with many other star-studded cameos called A Guide for the Married Man. 34-year-old Jayne had made it back into an A-list feature film, although it was a very brief appearance in the film. Although small, this role gave her hope. This was her break to get back onto the screen. But this would be her very last movie appearance. The opportunity didn't land her in more A-list work. Instead, she landed in England, where she performed in small taverns, on the docks, and in coal yards. Her private life was spiraling downward even faster now, too. Upon her return from England, Jayne's oldest daughter, 16-year-old Jayne Marie, got in the middle of a nasty drunken argument between Jayne and Sam. And she ended up being brutally assaulted by Jayne's boyfriend, Sam. It was a horrifying incident, and it pushed Jayne Marie to finally leave her mother. The police and social services got involved, and Jayne Marie went to live with family. Shortly after this incident, in June of 1967, Jayne was scheduled to do a club engagement in Biloxi, Mississippi. Following her June 28th performance, Jayne had to head over to New Orleans because she was appearing on a television show the following morning. Sam and her 3 children with Mickey Hargitay joined her. They were traveling in a silver 1966 Buick Electra, which Gus Stevens, the owner of the supper club she was performing at, let her use for the trip to New Orleans. Jayne didn't want to drive, and Sam's leg was in a cast as a result of a car accident he and Jayne had been in earlier that week. So Gus Stevens also provided a driver for them. 20-year-old University of Mississippi student Ronnie Harrison, who was working for the summer at Stevens' club. But he was also engaged to Gus Stevens' daughter, and they were expecting a baby. Their wedding was 3 days away. They left about 12:45 a.m. for the 90-mile drive from Biloxi to New Orleans. Ronnie and the 3 children were in the front, and Jayne and Sam were in the back seat so Sam could stretch out his injured leg. Also in the car were Jayne's 4 chihuahuas who were in crates. They stopped at a gas station along the route, and Jayne moved the children to the back seat so they could sleep more comfortably, while she and Sam moved to the front. She by the passenger door, and Sam in the middle of the bench seat. This would be a decision that altered the fate of Sam, Jayne, Mickey Jr., Zoltan, and Mariska. About 30 miles shy of New Orleans, they hit a windy section of road, the two-lane Highway 90, which was nicknamed Blood Alley because of the accidents that occurred regularly on it. An insecticide truck was spraying for mosquitoes a couple of vehicles ahead. Between the insecticide truck and the Buick was a semi-trailer truck. The semi slowed down behind the insecticide truck, and that's when tragedy struck. At 2:25 a.m. on June 29, 1967, all of the hopes and dreams and promise of Jayne Mansfield were ripped away in an instant. The car Jayne, 3 of her children, Sam, and Ronnie Harrison were driving in slammed into the semi-truck in front of them at full speed. The car went under the semi-truck, slicing the top of the car off over the front seat of the vehicle. Jayne, Sam, and Ronnie were killed instantly. Sam Brody was 40 years old, Jayne Mansfield was 34 years old, and Ronnie Harrison was 20 years old. All 3 of the children thankfully survived the horrific crash. 8-year-old Mickey Jr. sustained the most severe injuries of the children. He had a broken arm, a broken leg, and several lacerations. 6-year-old Zoltan was covered with cuts and bruises. And 3.5-year-old Mariska had nearly been suffocated because her head had become trapped between the back door and the back seat. She had a deep cut on her little face that was bad enough that she had to have surgery to repair it. And she still bears the scar today. Luckily, the driver of the truck and a passing motorist had acted quickly to save her and retrieve the children from the car once they heard their cries. 2 of the Chihuahuas died in the crash, and 2 survived and were taken to a local animal shelter. The next time you see a semi-truck, take notice of the bar that extends down from the rear bumper. This bar is intended to prevent vehicles from going under the truck. It is called a Mansfield bar, and it exists because of this accident. The children were rushed to a New Orleans hospital by other travelers who came upon the scene. The truck drivers did what they could to help the 3 adults in the car. Sam and Ronnie were completely pinned in, but they were able to free Jayne. Remember, the roof of the front half of the car had been severed off. This part is extremely graphic, so if you are sensitive to graphic details of injury, you might want to skip forward 30 seconds. According to the police report of the accident, quote, a large deposit of brains and a large portion of skull were scattered on the roadway, end quote. There was also brain matter and hair stuck on the underside of the truck. Jayne had been wearing a wig, and it had gotten caught in the broken glass of the windshield. There are rumors to this day that Jayne Mansfield was decapitated during this accident because of the photograph showing her wig. 16-year-old Jayne Marie found out about her mother's death in the morning newspaper, with the false report that her mother had been decapitated in the crash. She was shocked and devastated. Jayne Marie said in the biography documentary I watched, quote, to this day I hear from women, almost more than I hear from men, how much they admire Jayne Mansfield. They remember her as a very smart, funny, intelligent woman who cared a lot about her family, about people. And she was taken very young, but she gave a whole lot while she was here, end quote. Despite the hardships between Jayne and Jayne Marie, she always loved her mother and always wanted her to be happy and successful. She had hope for their future and in repairing their strong mother-daughter bond, but she would never have the chance to rebuild that relationship. All she had were memories. And she clings to the good ones. Horribly, many reporters said absolutely terrible things about Jayne Mansfield after her death. They criticized her work, her look, her image, and her personality. She died in a horrific manner, and there were people out there publicly shaming her. Evangelist Billy Graham even had the balls to say that this fate was what she deserved because of her sins. but she received love after death too. I really hope there was much more love for her than there was hate. When it was time to lay Jayne Mansfield to rest, she was brought home to where her life had begun. She is buried in her hometown of Pen Argyl, Pennsylvania. Her 3 children that were in the deadly crash with her were still hospitalized during her funeral. Her youngest child, Tony, was only a year and a half old when his mother died. The only reason he wasn't also in the car that fateful night was because of the ongoing custody dispute. He never had a chance to know his mother. Mariska doesn't remember her mother since she was so young, but all she has to do is look in the mirror and she can see that her mother is always with her. She is a perfect blend of her 2 drop-dead gorgeous parents. Jane Marie saw her father, Paul Mansfield, at the funeral. He had never been present in her childhood, and he wouldn't be present in her life as an adult. Her mother's funeral was the last time she ever saw her father. Soon after her funeral, there was a memorial service held in Beverly Hills. There is a memorial stone for her in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. I want to touch on the impact the death of driver Ronnie Harrison had on his loved ones, too. His fiancée, Elaine, who was his high school sweetheart, was devastated at the loss of her love and her entire future. Her parents, remember her father was Ronnie's boss and the man who volunteered him to be the driver that fateful night. They forced Elaine to give up the baby for adoption. A living symbol of the love she and Ronnie shared, a physical part of him, and she had to give him away. The accident altered the life of Ronnie's fiancée Elaine forever. She and his family always felt his death was forgotten, so I wanted to make sure to talk about him. Because his life mattered just as much as Jayne Mansfield's and Sam Brody's. 3 young lives were cut short in an instant that fateful night. Now I would like to share some other interesting facts I learned during my research. Bullet point number 1. During her early college days as a young wife and mother to an infant, Jayne worked for a short time at a veterinary clinic. Her heart would break whenever someone would bring their elderly or sick dog to be euthanized, so she would save them by taking them home and giving them a little more chance at life. When everyone died, I had a funeral for it and buried it with flowers and prayers, she said. Bullet point number 2. Jayne Mansfield was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960. Her daughter, Mariska Hargitay, was awarded one in 2013, right next to her famous mothers. Bullet point number 3. British singer Engelbert Humperdinck bought the Pink Palace when he first moved to the U.S. He put $2 million into the house to make it suitable for his family, and they lived in the mansion for 27 years. He kept framed photos of Jayne Mansfield on one of the staircases, and with the house came a slightly damaged nude bust of Jayne. The damage? It was missing the left nipple. And then, get this. After living in the home for a little while, the Humperdincks discovered that a man had been living in the attic. He would come down every night while the family was asleep and help himself to the food in their kitchen. He was discovered by a contractor who came to replace the roof of the house. The Pink Palace was demolished in 2002. Bullet point number 4. Jayne Mansfield was inducted into the Texas Film Hall of Fame in 2008. Her daughter, actress Mariska Hargitay, accepted the award in her honor. Bullet point number 5. One of the weird 1950s Jayne Mansfield promotional products that hit the market was a 22-inch tall, Jayne Mansfield-shaped hot water bottle of her in a black bikini. I don't know why, but you can get one for about $100 today if you want one. Bullet point number 6. Okay, we cannot talk about Jayne Mansfield without talking about that insanely popular photograph of her and Sophia Loren. I'm sure most of you have seen it. It makes its rounds on social media every few years. If you haven't seen it, let me describe it to you. It is a black and white photo taken in 1957 of both women seated at a table. Sophia Loren is wearing a black dress with a tastefully fitted bust and what looks like rhinestone halter straps. Jayne is wearing a long, tight satin gown, which looks more like a negligee, and the loosely dropped bust has got to be taped to her breast because it is very, very barely covering her nipples. In fact, in the infamous photo, you can just barely see a teensy tiny bit of her right nipple. The photo is made famous by the perfectly judgy side-eye look Sophia Loren is giving Jayne Mansfield's barely covered breasts. Here is what Miss Loren had to say about the experience. Quote, "She came right for my table. She knew everyone was watching. She sat down, and now she was barely, listen, look at the picture. Where are my eyes? I'm staring at her nipples because I'm afraid they are about to come onto my plate. In my face, you can see the fear. I am so frightened that everything in her dress is going to blow, boom, and spill all over the table." End quote. Sophia Loren, who is now 90 years old, does not like being associated with this picture, and she has always refused to sign autographs on that photo out of respect for Jayne Mansfield. Bullet point number 7. The epic 1989 LA Gun song, The Ballad of Jayne, was written about Jayne Mansfield. Now she's breaking hearts in heaven, shining bright in the sky. I still hear her voice in the wind. What a shame what happened to Jayne. In conclusion, Jayne Mansfield always dreamed of stardom, but her desire to be a star went beyond most girls' dreams of stardom. She was obsessed, and she was very determined. She was going to work her butt off sculpting her image and promoting herself until she achieved her dreams of becoming a movie star. And she did it. She showed us that hard work pays off, determination pays off, being productive pays off, advocating for yourself pays off. Everyone who truly knew Jayne Mansfield spoke about her loving and caring soul. She loved her children fiercely. Yes, it's true that she didn't know how to be a traditional mother and how to provide her children with the emotional support they needed. She didn't know the importance of that. She thought having her children with her physically was being a good parent, even if she didn't have the attention to give to them. She wanted to be a good parent most of the time, and she did it in the way she knew how. Now, as an early childhood educator, it pains me a little to say that, because I know how damaging that lack of nurturing and the trauma she put her oldest daughter through can be, but that is what her own daughter and father of her children said about her, that she truly believed she was being a good mother. And that's a lot more than we can say about a lot of others. You watch footage of Jayne Mansfield, and you can see that she really was a truly kind and gentle soul. You can see it in her eyes. But sometimes when a soul is covered up with such gorgeous, intimidating physical features like Jayne Mansfield's, people forget that that kind of package even has the capacity of housing a soul at all. I think Jayne had it all: a bright mind, a warm soul, an ambitious spirit, and a drop-dead gorgeous package to store it all inside of. In an eerie twist of fate, Jayne Mansfield died while traveling in a vehicle with her children, just like her father died while traveling in a vehicle with her. Like many other stars we've talked about on this show, Jayne Mansfield may be more popular today because of her death, not because of her life. But that girl lived life as fully as one possibly can. Yes, she was beautiful, but she was also highly intelligent, a talented musician, multilingual, full of so much spirit and love, and she had big dreams. And she didn't stop until she reached those dreams. Thank you, Jayne Mansfield, for teaching us how to hold on to our dreams and fight for them with all our might. Thank you for showing us that if we put in the work, we can achieve greatness. And thank you for Mariska Hargitay. And as always, thank you all for listening. Speaking of Mariska Hargitay, I want to share her amazing foundation with you in case some of you don't know about it. She founded the Joyful Heart Foundation in 2004, stemming from her role as Olivia Benson on Law & Order SVU. She was receiving thousands of letters and emails from viewers, from survivors of child, sexual, and domestic abuse, and she wanted to help. Her foundation's mission is to transform society's response to sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse, support survivors' healing, and end the violence. The Joyful Heart Foundation is also the creator of End the Backlog, which is a program responsible for identifying more than 225,000 untested rape kits that have been sitting in evidence across the United States. Mariska's foundation does really important work, so I wanted to share it with you. If you are a survivor and want to check out their resources, or if you want to donate to their programs, you can visit joyfulheartfoundation.org. Jayne Mansfield created a pretty badass daughter in Mariska Hargitay. And in reference to some other things discussed in this episode, I want to share a few other resources. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline is 1-800-422-4453. You can call or text BEGIN to that number, or you can live chat at childhelp.org. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, or you can text BEGIN to 88788 or live chat at thehotline.org. The Crisis Lifeline for help with alcohol and drug addiction, mental health struggles, or emotional distress is 988. You can call or text 988 or live chat at 988lifeline.org. Thank you again to my friend Cindy for requesting the wonderful Jayne Mansfield. Please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, and if you already did, if you could share it with your friends, that would be awesome. And if you're interested in getting some sweet bonus content, head on over to patreon.com/Stars of the Golden Age podcast to see what's available. You guys rock. My main source for this episode was the book Jayne Mansfield, The Girl Couldn't Help It by Eve Golden. I also used the book American Legends, The Life of Jayne Mansfield by the Charles River Editors, an A&E biography documentary called Jayne Mansfield, Blonde Ambition, an article from the June 29, 1967 issue of the Madeira Tribune from Madeira, California, a Vanity Fair article by Joanna Robinson from November 4th, 2014, and my very own Blonde Bombshell, IMDB.